Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. And today's random review is Britannia Hospital by Lindsay Anderson, recently released on Indicator. Now granted, this is another Indicator review. That is just a coincidence. It's not my fault if Indicator keep releasing interesting films that I want to have a little chat about. This is spy number 110, and it's actually quite a nice companion piece to Indicator's other release, The National Health, which is spy number 32, made in 1973. This is made in 1982, and it's a very interesting and strange film. It was shot mostly in a working mental asylum or mental hospital, and that kind of sums it up. It's almost like a Richard Lester film of the 60s and early 70s, even though it's directed by Lindsay Anderson, because it has a ridiculous Richard Lester type cast, and it does have that kind of anarchic, seemingly chaotic structure. I'm going to have to read from the little booklet the cast, because I literally can't remember everybody that's in it. There's a mix of film stars as well as television character actors. But there's Leonard Rossiter, Brian Pettifer, who's a Scottish kind of character actor who's mostly done television, but you recognise his face. Fulton Mackay, Graham Crowden as Dr. Miller, again, he's a familiar face, mainly from television. Joan Plowright, Robin Asquith, Malcolm McDowell, but he's not in the film that much. Mark Hamill, in between Star Wars films, but again, he's not in the film that much. You have Robbie Coltrane, Dandy Nichols, Brian Glover's in a couple of scenes, Richard Griffiths plays the hospital DJ, John Gordon Sinclair in an early role, Alan Bates as a patient who dies and he has no lines of dialogue. He's just on an operating table. But that's kind of the pull of Lindsay Anderson. If it was another director, then these actors wouldn't do this, just come in and just lie on a table. And Arthur Lowe, who sadly plays a patient who dies in the film, but originally he was going to play Leonard Rossiter's part, but he was just too ill to actually do it. And I've got a feeling he probably died sometime after shooting it. So it is a bizarre, you can see the caricature image of everybody's face on the cover. I mean, this film bombed when it came out, but it was very popular in France and Argentina because the Falklands War was going on. It's mentioned a couple of times in the extras. I should say the extras are pretty phenomenal as well. There's a BHP interview with Lindsay Anderson from 1991, which is 117 minutes long. So you can listen to that while you watch the film for the second time. There's a 21-minute 2020 interview with actor Robin Asquith. There's a 9-minute 2020 interview with Brian Pettifer. There's a 11-minute 2020 interview with Michael Ellis, who was the editor, and obviously there's a booklet. It's another really nice package by Indicator, not that I'm biased in any way, shape or form, even though I am. So what we have is a kind of satire in the NHS, but it's more using the hospital as an allegory of Britain at the time. That's probably why it was kind of popular in Argentina. As somebody who works in the NHS, I can perfectly understand the satire elements of both Britannia Hospital and the National Health, because a lot of the time it seems that the patients are actually secondary and diagnostic samples aren't quite as important as samples that bring in money. So we have there's kind of three things going on during the film, and again you can see why audiences might have a problem kind of becoming invested in the film, because there's no real main character to follow through the plot, the narrative, which isn't much of a narrative, but you have the kind of constant strikes and industrial action between staff and management. You have Dr. Miller, played by Graham Crowden, who's wanting to create a super being. So there's this Frankenstein story going on, and this is the shiny new institute which is part of the hospital. And you've also got the Queen Mother is coming to open the Miller Institute, so you have that going on. Meanwhile, there's a battle. There's protesters who are protesting the use of a public hospital for private patients, and they're getting caviar and champagne. And there's also an African dictator who's one of the patients in the private ward, who is a child killer and eats babies apparently. So you have industrial action going on, you have protesters who want the African despot out, who want the private patients out, and you have the Queen Mother coming at the same time, while you have this weird, strange Frankenstein experiment going on in the shiny new part of the hospital. So you could perhaps see audiences at the time just being overwhelmed with all of this. But it's an absolute joy. I still don't know whether it's actually a great film or not, but there's just so much going on and so many interesting things happening and so many great performances. Like I say, Malcolm McDowell plays an investigative journalist who's wanting to see exactly what's happening in the hospital, so he gets smuggled in with the help of a nurse, and he inadvertently becomes part of the Frankenstein project, and he's assisted in the van by Mark Hamill, who with another colleague spends most of the film stoned because they're taking marijuana and mushrooms and laughing at a documentary on the television about battery chickens. Again, it's a film that just wouldn't be made now, but strangely enough it's really relevant now to what's going on. It could have been made yesterday, apart from they just wouldn't have this spectacular cast to work with, and a studio would probably never support it because there's a lot of crazy dark things going on. I mean, the speech at the end that Graham Crowden does is just phenomenal, and it's pretty much worth buying the film just for Graham Crowden's speech at the end, as he's unveiling his plan for the future of humanity. And he talks about how actors in Hollywood make more money, in a month than would sustain a South American tribe for a year. And of course that was in 1982, not 2020, so obviously things have moved on but not really changed. There's high farce in it, but it's also quite gruesome. There's like grand guignol scenes near the end, as the Frankenstein project doesn't quite go according to plan. It's a very strange film, but I would say out of the two, not that this is a review of the National Health or anything, but Britannia Hospital certainly, I think, would hold up to repeated viewings more than the National Health does, which is a good little film. But Britannia Hospital is something completely different. I mean, you can spend the film pretty much seeing famous character actors' faces, and they'll only be in the film for like 2 minutes. Like I said, Brian Glover, for example, is only in the film for like 2 scenes. Leonard Roster's fantastic as kind of the hospital administrator, trying to get everything up and running for the royal visit, and he's constantly making deals with the union and the protesters and the strikers to try and get things off without a hitch, which obviously, spoilers, doesn't happen. It's just one of those films that perhaps isn't a great film, but there's just so much going on that I'll probably watch it again fairly soon. Again, when you have people like Malcolm McDowell and Alan Bates just coming along to do little parts, you can kind of see the pull that Lindsay Anderson had and how popular he was amongst these actors. Yeah, it's a phenomenal film. The Indicator release, the Blu-ray, the upgrade, it's really beautiful. It's funny, it's dark at times, but it's still relevant and it's still prescient. It's not a film from the 80s that's aged badly and isn't really relevant because we're not living in that kind of world anymore. As ridiculous as it kind of takes it, it's actually fairly realistic to the world that we're actually living in 2020. And for that, amongst several other reasons, I would recommend picking it up. So thanks very much even for watching this random review, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. Please let me know in the comments below whether you've seen Britannia Hospital or the National Health for that matter. Tell me which one you prefer and why, and hopefully you'll join me again. Hopefully you'll watch Britannia Hospital and enjoy it as much as I did. Yeah, it's an absolute treat. It's rough around the edges, but I think that's kind of the point. Yeah, a really interesting, jaw-dropping at times film from Lindsay Anderson. So thanks so much for watching. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying farewell.